Hey everybody, welcome to Hacker Practice. Our guest today is helping to lead the AI revolution. She is the COO of Boston's scrappiest machine learning startup. Her and her team of Olin Engineering dropouts are democratizing machine learning tools for hackers like me. I'm really glad to have this delightful prodigy on my show, the COO of Indico, Diana Yuan. Thanks for joining me, Diana. How are you doing today?
Good, very good. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm so glad that we get to chat. We always have fun when we hang out. The last time we hung out, what were we doing? Do you remember?
I'm actually not quite sure. I think the last time we spoke, we were just catching up and walking around Boston, if I remember correctly.
Oh, but didn't you and your team come over to play VR at some point?
Oh, yes. No, that was it. We played VR. You guys had the vibe.
Yeah, I've got one
And,
of those at my house now. Like, I'm obsessed with it.
yeah, and immediately after, actually, Aiden ended up buying a vibe.
Do you, for his house or for your
Yeah.
office? Do you guys have it at Indico?
So we had it at Indico for a couple months, but then Aiden actually went back to school to complete his degree.
Hmm.
And so he brought it back with him, and I think it's in his dorm room right now.
Yeah, I think building computers for VR might be a market or like a business opportunity because it's you need like a really good computer to run the high performance VR graphics and everything. Maybe I can come do that for you guys in your office. Now we met at TechStars. I wasn't at TechStars, but we met after you graduated from TechStars. Do you remember? I mean, do you remember our early conversations? Like, what were you thinking getting involved with the likes of me?
With the likes of you. I don't know. I was just super excited to talk to you because you clearly seem, like mover and groover and hustler in the Boston area. It seemed like you had a very good sense of, what's happening in the startup space in Boston. And you're also just pretty generally friendly. And you
Oh,
think everyone here, me and my team included, it's always good to meet like awesome people in Boston. Not to mention, I have to say, the Boston startup scene is pretty incestuous, as in, if you know like one person, you kind of know six,
yeah.
So yeah, I'm pretty sure also like the week after we had met, your name would come up like a bunch of times because that's the way things go.
Wow, that's scary actually to hear. Can you tell me a little bit about like your experience at TechStars? We've talked a little bit about it, but I think a lot of people are interested what it's like to go through an elite incubator.
Yeah, so Techstars was such a great experience for us, and a huge part of the reason why we were able to raise our seed round has to do with them, actually. I would also say getting accepted into the program kind of kicked our butts in gear, and we kind of turned from cool company project coming out of a college to, time to turn this around and make this into a business. So when we got into Techstars, there were only five of us. So I was brought in as a co-founder, I want to say a couple months after they had finished, the original two co-founders had finished, I want to say our junior year. So actually, I can kind of go into how I kind of got involved with Indico and how we got our start.
Yeah, take me through the origin stories. Take me through yeah.
Yeah. Our two co-founders, it started off with Slater and Alec. Alec is still an advisor of ours, but in the middle of last year, he transitioned to OpenAI, where he's continuously, bringing his machine learning to everyone there.
And just so people are aware, OpenAI is the nonprofit AI startup founded by Elon Musk and Sam Altman, I think, is involved.
I think Altman is involved. Yeah.
Okay.
They're like the Justice League of machine learning. They're a bunch of really cool projects. I think they've released some pretty good papers as well. Definitely worth following if you like the space. So it started off with Slater and Alec in their dorm rooms. Slater turned to Alec, was like, "Hey, let's make a bet. If we can make X amount of money in these 2 weeks, maybe we should start a company." So long story short, they were able to close a couple contracts. They incorporated, and we're like, "All right, great."
Whoa, can you? I mean, I don't know however much detail you can get into. Can you talk me through that? Because I think so many people have trouble getting their initial business going. What was that process like for Slater and Alec, if you mind sharing?
Yeah. So I definitely don't want to speak for them because I don't have too much detail. I do know what types of projects that they closed. I'm not exactly sure how they sourced them, if that makes sense. But what they were providing was pretty unique. I know they worked with a couple. I think there was like a fashion use case. So Slater has a lot of experience. He worked a lot of jobs also while in school. So he helped that network that he had definitely help him close contracts. Not to mention that they really knew what they were doing. So when they were able to approach these companies, these companies were pretty confident these kids could make something happen. So they closed, I think it wasn't that much money, but it was enough for them to be like, hey, why not? Let's start this. And kind of was put on the back burner. You're in school, other things take priority. And then Juliana Nazare, who was the rough draft partner, I think, at Olin at the time, basically convinced them to pitch to Rough Draft. So they ended up pitching to Rough Draft, and I think, and the people that, and it was Boyce, and I cannot remember the other partner there, but basically they were able to close $25,000 from Rough Draft. And because they were able to do that, they're like, all right, great, let's get an office space over the summer and let's actually start to do this. Let's hire some interns. And that's where actually I joined in.
Okay, so early on, Alec and Slater are kind of sitting in their dorm room. They've got some technology that they've built together for maybe a school project, and they say, hey, let's see if we can close some contracts. So they closed some early contracts. It sounds like one of them was like a fashion contract. Can you tell me maybe what the technology was doing for the client in either of these cases? Maybe from even just like a high level. If it's a fashion contract, was it doing text analysis or image analysis or what?
Oh yeah, I'm not exactly sure the task, but I know it was doing images, and I think it was some sort of matching. Yeah, I can't exactly remember the specifics. Mm-hmm. I'm actually not even sure if the company that they did the work for still exists, because I think it was also a startup.
Yeah.
But yeah, so so how I actually got involved. So my co-founders went to the Olin College of Engineering, which is out in Needham, and I actually went to the business school right next door, Babson College. Mm-hmm. And they're so close, like we share like a gym with them. It's like a 2-minute walk to their dorm. So like we're really, really close. That said, I have to say that the relationship between the engineering and the business school isn't, ideal, mainly because there is some tension there. You do get some, what I like to call just people who don't have an understanding of how technology should be work and still thinks that they can, appear at an engineering school and be like, hey, can you just build this for me? Like basically treating engineers like code monkeys, which is definitely not the way to go about it. So I actually met Slater through a class that we took. It was a Babson Olin Wellesley class called Affordable Design and Entrepreneurship. This class, to be honest, was not what I signed up for, or as in it was what I signed up for, but I did not expect the extent to which this class would go, which is this class was funded by outside investors, and they had, I think it's 9 projects going on all over the world. Each project gets handed down to the next class every semester, and each project is like a social venture. Mm-hmm. And essentially, this class was like, hey, you're going to start and run your own startup.
So the name of the class is Affordable Design and Entrepreneurship.
Yep.
And it's a Wellesley, Olin, Babson collaborative initiative. Sounds like it's funded by maybe some venture capitalists, or do you know who's backing it?
I think it was just organizations. Okay. So it's, not investors. I think I can't recall, and I think the investors in the course change every year, I would say, but the class itself is also taught. I think there was like one professor from every college was also there, and each project is uniquely different. So one project that's going on is in Ghana, and they make cassava graters. There was another one in India.
What? I'm sorry, what?
Yeah,
Cassava graders? What is cassava?
cassava.
What is it?
Cassava is it's I think it's a root,
Hmm.
but it's essentially how like a good source of food for them. But to actually, I think, get the husk or a rough part of it off, you need to use, I guess, something that like it's a piece of hardware that the class had made,
Hmm.
and it helps people in Ghana actually, I guess, harvest cassava in a more effective way.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so you met Slater and Alec in this class together. It sounds like you might have worked on a project together. Can you tell me about that? Like, what was
Yeah.
the
So that was an example of like one of the more successful projects that were going on. So told you how each project gets passed on to semester, right?
Yep.
So the project we inherited was coming from, I think, Alabama, and the project that they had was making bikes
Hmm.
to help promote, I think, the education system in Alabama, and just provide an outlet for at-risk youths. When we inherited the project, the previous team said this doesn't work, so you guys need to start over. So I was put on a team with Slater, and there was 9 of us, and we basically had to start from scratch. We had to identify a state to go to, figure out what problems we were going to solve, really do user research. So that's how we got working together. Part of the class was to actually go to Mississippi and like meet people and get roots down. And overall, it was a really good experience to have with Slater because obviously we were working together for this project, but also since this project uniquely started from scratch, we were doing a lot of user research and analysis that we would later do together at Indico. So that definitely helped prepare us for this.
So finding your technical co-founders, which is a big problem for a lot of non-technical people who want to start companies, what do you think was, like, what were the principles or strategies kind of at play there, or, elements that play there that made you guys discover that you're a good fit?
Yeah. So I think this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I could find when it comes to finding a technical co-founder as someone who's non-technical is not to force it, if
Hmm.
that makes sense, and start from a relationship aspect. So with Slater, we worked together on this project, and then it was only later when he hit me up and was like, "Hey, I'm working on something. Can I talk to you about it? Would love to hear your thoughts." He sat me down for an hour, talked his head off about machine learning. My eyes glazed over. I had no idea what he was saying. Went home, did my own research, figured out what he was saying, came back. So it was more so he reached out to me about the opportunity, and then we discussed it and was like, hey, this is a fit for the skills that I have. Because I was a first non-technical hire, they were like, we need someone who can do all this other stuff. So I think the best thing when finding a co-founder is you should understand that you're finding someone to build a business with. And you want to make sure that you're not choosing someone just because of their technical capabilities, right? If you're going to find an effective co-founder who's going to be as invested as you are in the success of your company, you want to make sure that your values align, the vision that you have going forward is at least aligned or understood. And I know, because I get this question a lot, right? People are like, should I go to meetups? Like, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I definitely think it's worth going out and meeting people. But when you go out and meet people, you should take it from the standpoint of, oh, would I want to spend, a lot of time with this person? Is this person reasonable to work with? And then from there, I would approach it as, hey, this is what I'm working on. Would you like to join me? Because I think there's this huge stigma out there that that a lot of people approach engineers and are just like, hey, I just need this built and I only need you to build this. I don't need your thoughts on it. I just want it built. Right. So I think there's like still that stigma that we need to fight. So in order to do that, I think the best way is to really just approach these conversations as hey, this is look at what I'm looking to start. Do you want to join? Do you think this is actually a good thing to pursue? Things like that.
So I want to dive into this a little bit more because it's a problem that a lot of people have. On my end, I'm usually the technical side of this, and so I am seeing exactly what you're talking about here. My last full-time job was at an agency where we were building product for startup founders, and when you're working with a client, this is actually why I left. When you're working with a client, you have an agency problem where your incentive is to continue working with that person, resell new contracts. So your goal isn't necessarily to make the best possible product or the most successful possible product. It's to make a product that the client wants you to continue working on. Which means a happy client plus an incomplete product, which to me, the incentives are not really there for agencies to do a good job for startup founders. So it is really important to find a technical co-founder. And then what you're saying is that when you're looking for a technical co-founder, start with an existing relationship or develop a relationship with someone. Make sure your values align. Maybe work together in some capacity before you really get hitched, right? Because having a co-founder is essentially getting married.
Yeah.
When you were first brought on, what was the list of things? What did it look like? What did they want you to do? And then how did that differ from what you actually ended up doing at first? And then, how has your role sort of developed over time?
Yeah. So when I was brought on, wasn't like I was given a list and you're just like this in charge of this. It was more like these are the things that we haven't done, and there are things that they didn't even think of when it came to like marketing and things like that. And I kind of just went in guns a blazing and tried to take on as much and do as much as I could. And then over time, I would actually say as we grew bigger, obviously, and we got more funding, we were able to bring more people on, and I was able to specialize a little more.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about those early days, like specifically,
Yeah.
what were like the top 3 things that you did maybe your first 3 months on the job?
I want to say it was a lot of branding
Mm-hmm.
and awareness stuff. So like using our Twitter and getting our social pages up and running. Wow, this was such a long time ago. I'm having a hard time remembering. I do specifically remember having to do a bunch of that stuff.
I remember when we spoke, which was obviously a little bit later. It seemed to me at that time that you were kind of the voice of the company because you were working with a ton of highly technical people and trying to translate, this technical value proposition to investors who are often non-technical and to customers who are technical, but you don't sell people on the technical benefits. You sell people on the emotional, like, here's why you need to work with us.
Yeah, so that was definitely part of our job. It was also like during that time, Indico was very our we had a we have since shifted, right? So when we first started up, it was like machine learning for everyone. Like we want to give it to everyone. We should put it into to the hands of every single developer. That's how we're going to get it to everybody, right? Because developers are the people out there making and creating all these new things, so they can use the power of machine learning, and hopefully we can get it into as many hands as possible. So that was kind of our mission. That's still our mission, but in terms of our approach, because we still see the possibility of machine learning affecting and improving everybody's lives. But what we've realized after being in this space for 2 years and understanding what we can control and what we can't control, as well as taking into factors such as where the market is with acceptance about machine learning technologies, our approach has changed, as in since then we've now focused on enterprise customers because in order for us to get machine learning into as many hands as possible, we still need to exist as a business, which means we still need to make money. And although we still provide a really free liberal plan for people to test us out, we understand that developers aren't people that we're going to be charging to make a sustainable product.
Right. So the why hasn't changed. Your purpose for existing is machine learning for everyone, empower everybody to use this tool. But your strategy for accomplishing that has shifted to focus more on generating revenue through deals with enterprise.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Go ahead.
yeah, sorry. So in the beginning, it was definitely a lot of talking to developers and getting involved at like hackathons. So I did a lot of like community outreach stuff, actually, which was actually really fun for me because that also allowed for me to, I guess, learn more about the culture. And in the beginning of Indico, I actually took like the Coursera for machine learning. I think I made it halfway through. And I also took CS50, I think the year before, which was also helpful.
So communications was a big part of your role early on. How has your role evolved? I mean, you were employee number 3, or founder number 3. Is that right?
Yeah, so
Okay.
yeah, one of the founders, we have 3 founders. So since then, so wow, we've gone through so many shifts. But I shed a few responsibilities as we hired people who specialize in like marketing and content creation, and things that I've taken on since then. So I can tell you day to day what I do, which is I do all the hiring, the HR, which includes all of our medical benefits, 401k, all of that jazz. Our finances, we do have like a bookkeeper we outsource with, but I mainly run the finances and stuff. Other than that, generally, if you think about everything that involves running a business that doesn't involve actually making the product, I am so more involved with that. So for example, right now we're moving our office space. So right now I'm spending so much time trying to get rid of furniture and sell things and getting ready for that move. So I want to say my job changes quite frequently on month to month based on what is a priority, but the big buckets don't really change, which is operations, HR, finance. Those things are basically my wheelhouse now.
Yeah, I think this is the reason I'm digging into this is because I think it's really important to illustrate to people thinking about starting a company that there is nothing that you should not be willing to do.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I think a lot of people get into it thinking, oh, this is what I do and this is how I'm going to contribute and I'm not going to do anything else. And I've literally fired people who said, no, that's not my job. I'll be like, well, you're damn right. It's not your job anymore.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Because the thing is when you're so small, every single person is important and bandwidth is so important. If you have someone who can do more than one thing, they're way more valuable to you. And not only that, in terms of like company culture wise, we want the type of culture where people, number one, feel encouraged to take risks and learn about new areas, as well as, feel comfortable enough to jump in somewhere else and be like, hey, do you need help with this? So it is kind of important to us that we're very open when people are like, hey, I don't like working on this, or can I shift more this way? If we can make it work, we'll try to make it work. But at the end of the day, like when it's all hands on deck, everyone pretty much understands like, okay, I might not look like doing this, but it needs to get done,
Right. I want to dig more into the sort of funding life that you've gone through. It sounds like you raised that initial 25,000 from Rough Draft, which is a venture capital firm in Boston, before you came on. But that was the initial kind of seed funding. How long passed, and what steps did you take? I guess just tell me the history, right? Like you raise this 25 grand, you come on, and then at some point you guys decide to apply to TechStars. Maybe you raise some money from TechStars. How does it work?
Yeah, sorry, sidetrack. So continuing on to the story
Yeah.
is I joined, get into TechStars. TechStars, we were in the class of fall 2014.
Wait, talk me through. I'm sorry. I just want to stop you because I know a lot of people are wondering, hey, how do I get into TechStars? Like, what makes me more likely to get into TechStars when I apply?
When I applied, it was Semyon who ran it. So one thing, obviously, the people who are running the program, I want to say, look for different things. I can tell you what they've told us that they look for, and I'm pretty sure this holds true. But the most important thing that they look for is the founders.
Mm-hmm.
When we applied, we really didn't have anything. We just had like the track record of things that we could do as a team and our big crazy idea of mission and vision.
Well, you had a little bit of traction. You had already raised some money, and you had closed a couple of small contracts, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so the money was for 25K, and I think that was actually just a convertible note from Rough Draft, which is like a I don't know what the right term for it, but it's GC's like wing. I know there's like dorm room fund that's like associated with another larger VC, but it's like similar to that. So it wasn't like I guess that does count as raising money. So that definitely did help. But another thing that helped is also like during the interview process, they go and they spend a lot of time talking to these people.
Talking to what people? I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost here.
Oh yeah, so talking to like the managing directors and the people who are going through the application process and looking through applicants.
Okay, so when you're applying for TechStars, you're kind of having conversations with the people who run the joint.
Yes.
Okay, and at the time you said Semyon ran the place. Tell us who Semyon is for those who don't know.
Yeah, Semyon is a rock star. He was actually a member of the MIT blackjack team.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do, but maybe my audience doesn't. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so if anyone recalls that movie 24, basically, I don't even know what time this
I think it's
around
called 21.
or 21, right? Wow, that would make more sense. It's I think a professor got together, a bunch of students at MIT, and started a blackjack team. And they went to Las Vegas. They won a bunch of money. I think there were actually ended up being two different blackjack teams, and Semyon was on one of them, and we actually had an angel investor on another. But so that's like one of his claims to fame. But besides that, he's also a board member of SMTP and is just a general rock star. He's super brilliant, is very good at giving you on-point advice about really everything. He's the type of person where you can, spend 20 minutes talking to, and at the end he'll say like two sentences, and you're just like, oh my gosh, and you've like totally blown the case wide open, or I haven't even considered that. He's really, really, really awesome. So we were actually his first class. He had just taken it over from Katie Ray, who is now at Project 11. She's also a rock star in the Boston scene. I personally have not met her, but have heard great things.
Yeah. Semyon, I just want to make a note about Semyon that he's extremely generous with his time and accessible. I mean, anybody could email Semyon, and if it's a short, to the point email with a specific ask, he usually will respond and help you out.
Yeah. He's great. He's really great.
So you apply for TechStars, you have a lot of conversations with the managing directors, you have a little bit of traction, you've got a team and a little bit of technology built. In your eyes, it doesn't seem like a lot, but I think that if you were to look at all of the applications to Y Combinator, for example, so many of them have no traction at all, no product, and it's highly unlikely that those startups are going to get accepted into these elite incubators. Can you talk to me about, so you get accepted into TechStars, what was the experience like? What were the most important lessons learned? What were the biggest challenges at that time for you?
Yeah, so TechStars is like a 3-month program. They give you $100K in a convertible note for, I think, 6% of your company. And now they have like a money back guarantee, which is really nice. So that $100K helped us actually hire and bring on more people, which is really nice. One of the challenges I have to say in the program is balancing the activities that they sign you up for and actually spending time on your business. The network that TechStars has for mentors is huge. They had this week called like Mentors Madness, where it's literally just back-to-back meetings with all these mentors, talking to them, figuring out who you want to engage with long term. And that's just like a full week. And then it hits, 7 o'clock and you're like, oh, wait, I haven't done any of the other things that I need to do. So one of the challenges for us, at least, was definitely balancing the time commitments and making sure, we're effectively incorporating all the new things that we're learning into the things that we're actively doing for the business. So those challenges. What did you say about the other ones? I forgot.
Well, I actually want to dive into this a little bit because I'm curious, do you see that balancing act that they kind of forced upon you as being a good thing? Like, do you think that you're better off for it? Can you talk me through that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, hey, I'm definitely someone who loves challenges because I think if you can make it through it at the end, you come out a stronger person, right? So I think going through that hectic time to help us, first of all, be better at getting feedback, because there's definitely an art to receiving feedback as well as giving it, I guess. But specifically, when you engage with someone only for such a short time, like 30 minutes initially, you want to be respectful of their insight, but at the same time, it doesn't mean you have to take their word as gospel, right? So,
Okay. So sort
yeah,
of taking what's useful and leaving everything else.
right. And understanding, what you should be bringing back and what you should be leaving behind. Because at the end of the day, you do know your business the best, but it is important that you are keeping an open mind to feedback. Um, but honestly, trusting your instinct is the best thing that you can do.
So you raised 25K from Rough Draft, then you got hired, and then you guys went to TechStars. At what point in this process did you guys decide, okay, we're dropping out of the elite universities that we go to?
Oh, right. Okay. So, I don't know if it was I guess it was kind of a conscious decision. So, for my co-founders, it's actually really funny. The reason why they don't have their college degrees is the reason why I was actually able to finish mine.
Oh,
It's fun. Yeah, it's hanging in the office.
the
But
the
that's
sole degree among founders.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's a business degree at a tech company. I'm like, oh. So the only reason I was able to finish is because my freshman year I had taken some classes over the summer, and there was a period of time where I was like, hey, maybe I'm going to graduate early. So I was luckily able to finish it by taking a couple online courses, which is really nice. And I had finished my requirements really early in my college career, so that helped. If that said, if it wasn't that easy to complete it, I don't know if I would have.
So the reason you graduated early, and B, you did it because it was easy, right? Or because it was easy in your eyes, right? Like, you obviously had this other opportunity. Would you have dropped out if it wasn't easy to graduate?
Oh yeah, so I was intending on graduating early when I started my college career, so that means that I was ahead on credits. So I actually graduated on time with my class. That said, when I got there, everyone was like, "What are you doing here?" But yeah, it's actually really funny. If you look at my GPA, it's a direct correlation to how Indico's doing, as in my grades get worse as Indico gets better. I think the semester we raised, oh, actually no, that was my semester off. If it wasn't as easy for me to complete my credits, I probably would not have. That said, my college gives you, I think it's 7 years to finish your degree, so maybe there's a way I could have. With my co-founders, what's interesting is they have some intro to programming courses they have to complete, and there's a year-long capstone project called Scope, which is a senior capstone for them, and it's basically they work for a company for a full year. And since they weren't able to do that, they couldn't graduate. So the irony of that is the following year after we raised money, we actually sponsored a Scope team.
I love this. I've had at least a few guests who are kind of in our peer group who have left school or skipped school entirely and had. I mean, I wouldn't be interviewing them if they haven't had tremendous results in their life. I'm curious, but you finished. I'm curious. Do you think that Slater and Alec are risking anything substantial by dropping out, or do you think that the cost benefit analysis is pretty obvious?
Very obvious, yeah. There's no doubt that they are. There's no way are they worse off. Mainly because, as you say, the world can be your classroom, as cheesy as that sounds. As long as you're doing something and not, sitting back and relaxing, it shows. They left school and immediately went to working on a company, right? And that shows value. It's a different kind of experience. And I actually don't even know if they can go back to finish their degree, but I know they both don't have any regrets.
Yeah, and I wonder why, what would even be the benefit in doing so? I think that when you look at, the traditional reasons why people go to college, to be employable, to build a network, I think the building a network one is in your case, it makes sense because, hey, I built my network and was able to start a company. But I'm sure that the real networking happened after you left school and started meeting guys like Semi and Ducatch and everybody at TechStars.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. Going out to a lot of events in Boston. I actually wish I made better use of my alumni network, but it's not as, yeah,
I'm
clear.
I'm curious if there's anybody who feels like they're making really good use of their alumni network. So
Mm.
maybe. So we talked a little bit about getting into TechStars. It sounded like having the traction and having the team with the ability to execute was helpful getting in. Talk to me a little bit more about the experience. It sounds like they had a lot of uh, activities planned for you. What were the top lessons that you learned, or the most important things that stick out?
Um, let's see. The biggest thing, so they had a lot of sessions like how to recruit or how to do a good elevator pitch. Um, One of the biggest lessons I actually got out of it, which I think is really interesting, is we had a video call with, I think it was Brad Feld, and I think the topic was harmony of work life, not work. So basically, the idea is no work life balance. There should be a work life harmony. And one of the things that he said that really resonated with me, and I think about it quite frequently, is how a way to define what an introvert and an extrovert is. So obviously, being a founder of a startup or any company in general does require you to, network, go out, talk to a lot of people, talk on podcasts like this. And his definition was if you are around people and you get energy from them, then you're probably an extrovert. If you talk to a lot of people and you, at the end of the day, feel a little drained after being around a lot of people and talking to them, then you're probably an introvert. And the reason why that stuck out to me is it's not, identifying and put yourself in a box. It's identifying how you react to those situations and how to work in harmony with them. So I'm definitely someone who, at the end of the day, although I go out a lot and I am pretty social and I love meeting new people, at the end of the day, it does tire me out. So how that affects me is I just make sure I have at least 2 nights a week to myself to not do anything. Otherwise, I burn out. So that was something that I took away personally, and I think I've definitely shared that with as many people as I can. But it's just basically understanding who you are as a person and realizing what you need to be the best you can be and perform as best you can.
Yeah, I've always found that definition of extroversion versus introversion remarkable because nobody from the outside would call me an introvert. But I do get exhausted from hanging out at parties or socializing with a certain number of people.
Right?
And I think that a lot of people use introversion as an excuse to be antisocial, when in reality, many people who appear extroverted on the outside are actually working really hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that a lot too. People are like, "Oh, you're so chipper," and I'm like, "I am, and I am happy, but like, I will crash real hard after this."
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing and in conversing with founders about the most important lessons that they've learned. So many of them are around work-life balance and maintaining a positive attitude. And I mean, because share with me what has been your experience with the emotional roller coaster ride of being a startup founder.
Oh, it's definitely a roller coaster for sure. I have to say, I've been very fortunate enough where we haven't had anything huge happen to us. Knock on wood. Huge in a negative sense. But yeah, I don't know. Can you repeat your question again?
Well, are there any turning points in the business where you felt especially negative or pessimistic or maybe just personally drained, and how did you deal with that at the time? And because now you're obviously still there working hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you get over that?
Yeah. Okay. So, so when fundraising is interesting. I would definitely recommend I think is there's only certain types of businesses it makes sense for you to raise money. And if you don't have to take money, I don't think anybody should. That said, I'm not saying we have great investors, they're all awesome, but fundamentally, when you're taking someone else's money, it's not your money now. You know, it comes with strings. You are responsible for paying it back and in some form of value. And for me, that I think the most stressful stressful, I think would be the word, would be the periods in which we were waiting for the money to come in. Because when you raise money, investors won't give it to you unless you really need it, and they know how much money you have if you raised from them before. So there's always that tricky 2 to 3 week period when you're getting really close at the end of your runway where it's like, oh, okay, we're going to make payroll this week. When is the money coming through? Have we finished all the paperwork to close around? So there's definitely been a couple of days in there where it was like, any day now, any day. And I think those were definitely the ones that were a little tricky. I'm trying to think if there's ever been a time where I felt like we were really in trouble. I mean, I personally always plan worst case scenario, particularly with our finances. We don't frivolously spend a lot of money on anything. But other than that, I think at our stage right now, money related issues is probably what makes me nervous the most.
Yeah, I think it's really important for investors to hear this too, because I think like prime strategy among a lot of investors is that waiting game. And I don't think that they realize the cost that they're incurring on the team in terms of emotional well-being. And obviously, if you're incurring an emotional cost, you're probably incurring a productivity cost. So I'm glad that somebody's talking about this.
Right. Yeah. And I think, but it also, I always putting yourself on the other side of the table, kind of makes sense, right? Because if you're in a worse position, maybe you're going to be more likely to take a worse deal or accept terms that maybe you wouldn't have necessarily accepted if you had like 5 months of runway. At the end of the day, it's all negotiation. And, one thing I will say though is when picking investors, you don't want to pick investors for their money. You don't take investment just for the money. You want to make sure that you're picking people who will help you grow your business. It might be through their network, or maybe they have expertise in a certain area that you need. But if you just need a check, you should not go to a VC for that, because you want to make sure that they are aligned with your vision for your company and the direction that you want to go. And I think that's like a huge thing to anybody considering VC funding.
So we'll avoid some topics here because you're right in the thick of it. I do want to know though, is there a particular person or backer that has been much more influential or helpful than you expected them to be, or like any of your backers or partners come to mind as being like especially generous and helpful? And how so have they been?
Let me think.
Now's your chance to score some brownie points.
Right. So everyone that we have who's invested in us thus far has been great. Like if we ever ask for anything or need anything, they're more than happy to help out. I want to say at different stages, different investors or advisors have helped us out depending on where we are. I can say concretely, like in my day-to-day right now, we work with Kurt Walter at HTV Ventures. They're a recruiting firm, but like one of our like biggest believers from the very, 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 very beginning. They've been really helpful I'm currently trying to hire for 4 different positions right now. So they've been helpful not only giving advice, like, this is how you should do the salary negotiations. These are like some pretty good candidates. Maybe you should take a look at them. And they also help us running like background checks and things like that. So Court has definitely been very helpful in these past couple of months. Other than that, Semyon is really great. If we ever feel like we need to make a really important decision or think about something really crucial, we definitely reach out to him. And then I can also name like another handful of people that we go to for like specific things, but I don't know if that's. crucial.
So it sounds like the big help that they are providing is around sort of like hiring and finding the right people to fill roles. I'm curious, in your negotiations with, let's start with investors. What have you learned? What do you think is important to keep in mind when negotiating, term sheets with investors, or what is like the number one thing that you've learned?
Ah, so that is definitely not something I'm equipped to answer. So my business partner Slater actually did most of the negotiations.
Okay. I'll ask him when I get him on the podcast, which I hope to do one day because I know that he's pretty much a genius, but he's a little bit. Um, I think I would have a harder time getting him on the phone for a conversation like this since he's pretty heads down on product. Is that right?
Oh yeah, he's actually with our CRO. They're in New York City right now on some business meetings.
Awesome. Tell me what you've learned about hiring.
Oh man, so much. Wow. So we're right now a team of 8, and six of the 8 are technical. So we're a very highly technical team, and usually when I'm hiring, it is for technical talent. I think the biggest thing that I've learned is to try to front load as much as you can the technical testing portion. So in a sense where there was a period of time, the last hiring cycle a year ago, where we were getting on the phone and talking to these engineers, and they could talk a really good game, but then once we brought them into the office, it turned out they were just missing fundamental knowledge that we required from an ideal candidate. So what we ended up doing is just making sure that before we invest a lot of employees' time sitting with them and talking to them in like a meet and greet style, we just make sure that we ask one technical question over the phone, and then when they come in, they do the technical portion first, and then if we want to bring them in to meet the rest of the team, that comes after they've passed that.
Okay, so essentially try to save time by putting these technical filters up front, automating them as much as possible, etc.
Right.
What about good?
Yeah, because culture fit is huge when you're very small, and depending on who you talk to, people will either say, at such a small size, most people will probably say that culture fit is more important than necessarily technical chops. But for us, there's definitely a bar that you need to pass for the technical fits. So we spend a lot of time with the candidates making sure, like, just not even talking about technical related stuff, but having them get to know who we are as like a team. Because team dynamics are so important, because losing one person or adding one can severely change that.
Mm-hmm. Have you, and you don't have to mention any names, but I'm curious, like, have you had any hiring missteps, and like what did you learn from that? What were as much of the details as you can share?
I don't know if there's any like huge missteps.
One thing I've noticed with a lot of startups, and I've seen this at companies that I've worked at, is when they raise money, a lot of the time what will happen is they'll immediately create a long list of roles they need to fill, and then fill several of them. Yeah. And then have to roll back. So I'm curious if,
that's did you know this already? So yeah, if you talked to me a year and a half ago, we would actually be 17 people. So I will say there is a thing as growing a little too fast. That 17 people included 2 interns. And obviously since then we've had some transitions. We had some realizations that, we didn't actually need someone in these positions yet. So I think a huge thing would be to make sure before you're hiring, and even in the process of hiring, even if it comes out during the process, like, oh man, maybe we don't need this candidate anymore. Or sorry, not candidate, this job position anymore. Definitely be very cautious before you start hiring to make sure that there's like a job description, who they're going to report to when they come to the company, like what sort of stuff are they going to work on. And when it comes to things that they're going to work on, make sure it's going to be if you're hiring for full time, that is, make sure it's for something that is not a 3-month project, right? Because at the end of that 3 months, what are they going to do then? So I definitely think, yeah, no, you definitely hit that on the head. There is definitely such a thing as people getting a little too excited when they get the funding.
Yeah, and I don't think it's anything to be embarrassed of because, as far as I know, it happens almost universally with like
Yeah.
venture-backed startups and it seems like there isn't anybody like calling them out on it. Like investors never seem to say, "Hey, maybe you're growing too fast." Like the investor doesn't have a good reason to say that, but at least in my personal experience, I've seen it happen so many times now where that I think it's almost like a law. And that because nobody's really talking about it and nobody really has an incentive other than the founder to be aware of it. Well, even the founder has troubling incentives because they want to grow their company as fast as possible too. And so it just seems like natural that you try to hire as many people as you can, but it's actually not a good way to go. So what about right now? What is like the biggest thing that you're focusing on, the biggest challenge that you're facing in your day-to-day roles?
Um, I would say there's isn't like a specific thing right now. I would say it's the balancing of all the things at once. So I have like the office move is happening, renewing our health insurance. We're currently hiring, and if we do end up making an offer, that means I'll be doing all this onboarding stuff. So rather than it being like a one specific thing in a specific area, it's more like me making sure that I'm chipping away at all of my tasks at once effectively and prioritizing it all as they need it to be.
Do you want to plug the roles that you're hiring for?
Sure. Yeah, we are. So we've got openings for a front end engineer, back end engineer, machine learning engineer, and a field engineer. I do want to be explicit that, unfortunately, in our startup stage, we cannot offer any relocation for this position, so you have to be already in Boston. And there's no like visa sponsorship that we can offer as well, because that stuff is expensive. Let me tell you.
My goodness.
Yeah. So one thing I do know from experience, it was like 30 grand for us to try to apply to get someone a visa. We did this 2 years ago, like right after we raised. Yeah, we didn't get it. It was like a lottery. It was also that year they were only accepting like 30% as opposed to like 50. So it's an investment. That's for sure.
Oh my gosh. I want to talk a little bit about this because it's a problem that I've seen while doing hiring at startups, and it's also extremely relevant because it seems like it's becoming even more difficult to hire people who
Oh
are not born
my
here.
gosh, yeah.
Talk to me. Well, I mean, why is this just, I mean, we can talk about the travel ban. I would love to talk about sort of this crazy macro situation that we're dealing with. Please, like, tell me what you're feeling, what you're seeing in the business world as a startup that's trying to, innovate and push the economy of the United States forward.
Exactly, right? I think the biggest thing is I've been actually pretty impressed and a little surprised that a lot of tech leaders have really come out being like, dude, we can't do this immigration things is going to hurt us. And I totally agree. I think the fact that so many people are speaking up about it is really great. At the same time, it's like mixed emotion because the other part of me wants to just like cry because it's like, really, this is happening now. This is happening now.
I mean, it makes your life materially more difficult.
Right. So I think I saw someone tweeted, it was like, these are all the companies that were founded by immigrants. And the list was huge. And it was like all the big names that you could think of. My parents, so I am first generation American. My parents immigrated here. They came to grad school and they went to the University of Iowa. And they're United States citizens, which is nice because I'm like, all right, I think we're safe here. But I just think it's crazy. So like we as a company cannot sponsor visas right now, mainly because it's the cost thing, right? But that said, we totally intend to invest that capital and if there's a candidate that's a rock star, of course we'll go to the lengths that we need to help them bring here. What makes me nervous about all this stuff is what's going to happen in 5 years when we're really seeing that, we're not having as many people come in or just things are the attitude in which is we're projecting to the rest of the world, I don't think it's healthy, and I don't think that it will help at all, because I can't imagine someone being like, all right, let's go over to America. That seems like a best bet. Because when my dad tells me this all the time, it's like America's the land of opportunity. That's why we came. It was a no-brainer. Of course we would come here. This is where you can start from the bottom and really make something for yourself. And it's concerning that, yeah, things are changing. I don't know what you think about it.
So yeah, full disclosure, my father is also an immigrant from India. So yeah, I really benefit from people. I have in the past benefited from people being allowed to immigrate to a country that was, founded on, the backs of people who were all immigrants. And I think it's pretty obvious that any restrictions on bringing new talent to this country is going to hurt startups. And I also think it's just remarkable that, we're making decisions, macroeconomic decisions based on the welfare, really, of the manufacturing economy, which has not been the driver of our economic success for decades. And I think that, what America is really, really good at, and what our competitive advantage is over the rest of the world, is that we are good at doing what has never been done before. And if we do not focus on our strengths, which is essentially innovation and building, creative knowledge economy type work, right? Anything from entertainment to technology, I think that we will lose our competitive advantage. And, I think it's becoming pretty clear that they're, I could rant about it, Diana. I think that, we like at this point, like the federal government doesn't even have like the legitimate rule of law at this point. I mean, if the president can break the law and then enforce, his policies that break the law, then I don't really see there being a rule of law. I see it as being like an authoritarian dictatorship, and I'd be happy. Like, obviously, I'm happy to put that out publicly because I think it's. Have you ever read Anti-Fragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb?
No, what was it about?
It's about things that gain from disorder, but essentially his ethical rule is that you are only as good as the risks that you take for the good of others. And yeah, I mean, that's like one point of like a massive book, but I think that, we all should be comfortable taking risks to speak truth. And, I actually just looked up the United States Code against treason, and it's like very loosely worded. It basically says that you are not allowed to advocate for a forced or violent revolution. And so I think the word forceful revolution is so vague that you could pretty much prosecute anybody just for saying, hey, we need to, impeach the president, or hey, we need to rewrite the Constitution. So I do think that there is a material risk to talking about these things out loud. And I don't want that to stop me, because I think it's what makes being a good person,
Right?
being a good person.
Scary though, and we saw evidence of it like last night when what's her name, Sally Yates, was just. And I think, did you read it? It was she in the statement by the White House. It was like she had betrayed, like they used the word betrayed. It's just so I don't know. Every day I wake up now, it's like, okay, what's the damage report? What's going on now?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think that at least like personally, I'm not a member of any political party. I would see myself as being a libertarian. I've been using the word technological libertarian for a little while now. And so it's really troubling to see, generally the Republicans used to be kind of, the party that libertarians would be looking to, in terms of advancing our agenda. But now, I don't really see either political party as useful in advancing, a pro innovation agenda, a pro technology agenda, a pro states' rights agenda. It's we're in a mess. But you know what? I want to point something out to you, Diana. Thomas Jefferson was 25 years old when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, and I think that it's our generation that's going to have to step up and take responsibility for the mess that our fathers and mothers' generation has left for us. Do you have anything else to say on that? Because I'd be happy to also move on to more
Right. I
different
actually
topics.
didn't know that it was only 25. I had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, really, all the founding fathers, except for Benjamin Franklin, were, pretty young. So, I mean, Benjamin Franklin was like in his
Huh.
80s, but George Washington was, I think, in his late 30s, and Thomas Jefferson was pretty young.
Wow. So
Yeah,
yeah, I guess Ben Franklin was just the adult in the room.
yeah, he was, and he was also, he was kind of the voice of reason in a lot of ways, and I'm not an expert in American history, but I am fascinated by it, and I think that it really should inform the way that we look at current events, because what happened 250 years ago is what is allowing today's events to unfold.
Yeah, it's true.
So let's talk about Indico. What does Indico have? Like, what's your secret sauce, Diana? What do you have that every other machine learning startup should want?
Um, so one plug about machine learning startups in general is, so when we first started, there were so many other machine learning startups that were around and running, and kind of one by one, they've either, closed down shop, were sold or acquired, or, kind of just disappeared. Some turned into just open source projects, but just kind of a note on I think the space is, we're going to see moving forward a lot less of machine learning startups. And we're actually shifting how we talk about ourselves as well. Like we are, I still do say we are a machine learning startup just because it's easier to pin it that way. But the successful startups moving forward, I think that what they'll need to do is they'll need to apply machine learning technologies to an industry. And actually that's the way I think that we're going to see machine learning actually getting into use. 2 years ago, like when we raised money, we were definitely like, we're a machine learning startup. All we do is machine learning, and we're going to sell it to X, Y, and Z. And our machine learning stuff is going to be so good. Of course, it'll work. Unfortunately, we're definitely not there yet. There are still unique problems that, machine learning can solve, but needs to have customized work done with it. And there isn't going to be a cookie cutter solution that comes out at any point, I think, in the near future, that can apply to everything. So for us, our secret sauce does come down to an approach that we use for machine learning. But that said, I wouldn't say that every machine learning startup would want it, because I think everybody has a different approach, and that's what makes them different in how they execute on things. For us, our secret sauce is we use a lot of transfer learning.
Transfer learning. Can
Yeah.
you define that for people who don't know?
Yeah. So the best way that I can explain what transfer learning is let's say you have a toddler and like a baby, like a 1-year-old baby. If you try to if you show the baby a tiger, you're going to have to teach it, okay, it's a cat, it's big, it's large. You're starting from scratch. If you have a toddler who has already learned like the color orange, stripes, it's a lot easier for them to conceptually understand what a tiger is. So transfer learning is basically us teaching a toddler rather than a baby. So what we do is we take our approaches for one specific problem and we try to apply it to another.
Okay. And this is happening sort of behind the scenes. The technology is for lack of a better word, sharing some of this conceptual knowledge. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So your secret sauce is this methodology of transfer learning. Obviously, there's a lot of technical underpinning that is really like your intellectual property. Obviously, you can't share the details of your intellectual property with me, but I'm curious how you do think about protecting that secret sauce and building on it as a strength and keeping, people who would, really love to know from finding out.
Yeah. So I think one of the biggest advantages that we have is also that our team is very good at staying up to date on what's happening in the research space and applying it in industry right now. Because traditionally, a lot of machine learning was stuck in universities because really wasn't only until recently that the technical capabilities made it easy for like the common day person to purchase like a graphics card and run your own model. So there is still a lot of great stuff happening traditionally in the academic space. And my co-founders are really good about keeping up to date with all the papers that are coming out and seeing what works. Also very up to date on what's happening in like the open source community. In terms of so like that really helps us stay kind of ahead of the game and definitely contributes to, I think, why a lot of our algorithms work really well.
So let me ask you this, from a technical standpoint, and obviously you're kind of on the non-technical side of things, but I'm always curious. I just got off an interview a few days ago with Jesse Anderson, who's kind of like Mr. Big Data. Do you guys have a lot of computing challenges? Like, are you using AWS to sort of outsource some of your computational, resources? Like, how do you have? Tell me about the GPU problem, basically.
Yeah. We actually were on AWS. We're actually in the middle of a migration to Azure.
Oh, why? Can you tell me why?
Money.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. We've been lucky enough. They've given us a bunch of credit that we can use on Azure, so we're switching over to them. Otherwise, we'll be paying in 5 figures for computing every month. And AWS is interesting. I feel like I look at their invoices and I'm like, the level of detail is so unhelpful. That said, we've been on AWS for quite a while. But yeah, looking forward to switching so we can save some money though.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Jesse recommended Google's cloud tools. I'm sure you shopped around, but
yeah, GCE, we actually are on them and on them as well. I think we have a couple things spinning up on there that have been steadily running. From what my team tells me, GCA is pretty solid.
Mm-hmm. So let's say that I'm looking at starting a machine learning startup and I'm just, budgeting for the first year. What would you estimate? Like, what would you ballpark for me getting started, first year machine learning startup? How much money should I have in the bank just to pay for my computation?
Just for the computation?
Yeah, just for the resources running in the cloud somewhere.
Honestly, there's a huge amount of variability in that in terms of it depends on what are you building? Do you need to acquire your own data? What types of models will you be running? What kind of tests will you be running? If you're thinking about,
I also have a follow-up question that you just mentioned. Where did when you were first getting started, where did you get your data, your training set data, if you know?
That is part of our secret sauce.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Acquiring that seems to be so. I speak with data scientists and people who work in big data, cluster computing, cloud computing a lot, and acquiring data is a massive problem for a lot of people getting started, and cleaning data, like normalizing it, seems to be 80% of the work involved.
Yeah, actually, when we first started, data scientists was one of our biggest user groups. So we've actually tried to develop tools that are less dependent on data, as well as facilitate them through their journey. So I don't know if you actually know this, but we recently released a crowd label, which allows people to label their own data, and then custom collections. Custom collections allows you to train your own customized model with as little as 10 examples to start with.
Really? Okay, this is great. Crowd Label is a new product that you just released. Who is your target market for this product? And talk to me about it.
Crowd Label is kind of something that we built to help out with custom collections. Custom collection is what I would say would be the main focus, the main product Because what we found is a lot of people came to us and were like, hey, I need to label my data. And we were like, okay, well, maybe we should make a tool that helps them label the data. So we built that tool. They can like invite other users to help label their data. But the idea there is that now that they have the label data, they can quickly feed it to custom collections and spin up their own custom model.
And who would want to use this? Yeah, custom collections.
Yeah. So really, we've seen such a variety of different people. We get anyone from people at ad agencies to people at small startups. Content is also huge, but I would say it really comes down to number one, being able to use the tool, so having at least some base understanding of machine learning. As well as knowing exactly what kind of problem that you're trying to solve. So I definitely, if anyone comes to me and says, hey, I have my own data, I immediately say, hey, you should check out custom collections.
That's awesome. So your secret sauce is essentially like this vertical of all of the things that you're doing in order to provide this technology to your end users from like an intellectual property standpoint. I think I touched on this a minute ago, but I do want to drill down. How do you protect that? What is your thought process around protecting that intellectual property from, and for the sake of argument, I'm sure you also have a lot of client data and other things that you're kind of protecting, that you need to protect because obviously you're in an extremely competitive environment. How do you think about that? What are your processes in place? What are your what disciplines do you practice in the company to protect that information?
Yeah. So we consciously as a team made certain decisions to kind of like put, our users first. So one of these is we don't actually, and all the data that gets sent to us, we don't save at all. There is in one of our custom collections, there's like a checkbox if you want to have it sent to us, just for like logging. But because that's a concern we get, people are like, what are you doing with my data? Are you like saving it and using it to make your model smarter? And no, we don't see it at all. We don't save it, or anything like that. In terms of like protecting what we do, so secret sauce, a lot of it, I would say trade secret, maybe, as in, we don't talk about it. And then obviously legally we have certain stipulations in place to make sure that, when we sign contracts with enterprise, like who owns what, things like that. Lawyers are definitely pretty important to have. Try to find yourselves good lawyers.
Can you talk to me about your internal decision making process around these things? Like how did when did it first start coming up? When did you start taking the risks seriously? Because with every startup, it's kind of like everything you do really early doesn't matter very much. No one's heard of you. No one's looking at you. You have nothing to lose. But as soon as you get accepted into TechStars or raise a multi-million-dollar round, all of a sudden you are being looked at, and is like a big collection of Chinese and Russian hackers out there who would just love to find out how you're doing what you do. When did it start becoming a priority, and when do you have anything that you would do differently now if you were starting over?
So I think when it comes down to evaluating like what kind of like safety things you should have in place, I think it has to do with the amount of stakeholders you have involved. And so for us, like we got into TechStars. Now we have someone who gave us a convertible note, like more stakeholders, more people to, not necessarily report to, but there's just more people involved. Like this even includes users, right? So now that we have more users going, like now we need to take more careful consideration in these areas, like in their safety. So there was definitely a distinction between rounds for us when we raised money. Like our lawyers were like, okay, now that you're this big, make sure that, these contracts are in place for your personnel. These are the type of insurance policies that you need to have. So I think it has to do with not only like the size of the company, but as well as like how its growth is going. Not only in terms of like their product, but also like the involvement in how much information they are getting from, things like their users or clients.
Yeah, this is fascinating to me because it's having worked in several startups, one of which is a startup that shocks people. I've definitely thought long and hard about how to manage the growth of a company and a user base with the risk of something terrible happening. And so, now it's just a fun point for me to look at. I'm curious what your investors like early on, do they ask questions around this? And now do because you just, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you just closed a bridge round recently. Is this something that came up in discussions? Were there not ultimatums, but, suggestions that got brought up? And it sounds like you obviously went through the getting a lawyer and kind of talking through some of the legalities of it. What has it looked like in terms of recently with this bridge round and your investors? Like, what do they say? Do they even bring it up?
Well, so I mean, what do you mean by do they always bring it up? Like safety concerns and things like that? Yeah, they communicate. So I mean, with our investors personally, they've been really great. Obviously, if they think we need something, they'll tell us. I think what's really important is that you are picking your investors, like no one is forcing you to like take a term sheet or anything. So like our working relationship is great with them because we chose them, you know what I mean? Like, and so we know that, if we need something, they'll tell us. And if they think we should have certain, things in place, they'll tell us, because at the end of the day, they are on your side, right? Because you brought them on to help you actually grow and build this business. So, we do trust them to give us the heads up on certain things that, we are first time entrepreneurs. We haven't seen everything. And there's some things that, really can't learn, and expertise takes precedent over. And that's what we depend on them for.
Do you have any scenario planning or response planning around like worst case scenarios, black swan events, a breach of your data? So it sounds like you don't really keep client data, which I think is obviously a smart way to not have that. But especially around your intellectual property, do you have sort of worst case scenario planning for that?
Yeah, we do have thought through it, and as we are closing contracts with some of these customers, in the contracts they require us to have certain things in place. So we do have over time built in more safety procedures and things like that.
Can you talk me through what some of those might look like?
That I do not know.
That's more on the technical side, firewalls and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So like we have a firewall. You actually just reminded me I need to renew it. It's the last day of January. Okay.
Hey, no worries. This podcast won't go out for another few weeks, so you have plenty of time to renew your firewall.
Wow. Okay. But yeah, types of things like that. We haven't had anything huge. I think the biggest thing that we always plan for is like what happens if we run out of money. I think is the biggest one that we plan for, and I think as long as the worst thing you can do is just close your doors, everything else is really okay, right? So I mean, when we got into this, we didn't know it was a risk. It's not like every startup succeeds. So I think, yes, we try to prepare ourselves as best for the things that we can foreseeably happen. But at the end of the day, we do know, if certain things happen out of our control, you kind of just got to do whatever you can in your power to stay afloat. But, we try not to spend too much planning for things that won't happen, if that makes sense. I think there is definitely, I don't know if overprepared is the right word, but spending your time on things that, might not necessarily happen might not be the best use of your time. So we always try to make sure that we're looking at like, these are the type of risks that are common for us at this stage and where we are and with the activities that we're doing. Those are like the things we try to look into.
So this is fascinating because I love this idea of more stakeholders means that you have more risk, but also as you've developed sort of a book of business and gotten more contracts, those contracts have kind of forced you to take certain precautions that obviously protect your intellectual property and also protect your client data. So that's really interesting and something that a lot of startup founders I think will run into.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like I know that we might have to get like certain insurance policies just because like a customer is like, do you have this? Like, we need you to have this. So yeah.
Awesome. So a few more questions and then we'll wrap up. Indico, how can my audience of people who especially work in startups or maybe are they're freelance developers or they're SMB owners, is there, what can Indico do to help? What do your products do? Why should they look to Indico first for any kind of machine learning needs?
So that's really easy as to why I think we're a good place to start first is we have such a variety of different, so we specialize in unstructured text and image analysis. So obviously if you're working with audio, we can't help you there. But I definitely recommend coming to us and testing us out first, mainly because we are, free. 10,000 API calls does give you a lot of leeway to do some testing of your own to help discover, is this the right service for me? Is this the type of input or an output that I want to be using? And for people who have little to no experience in machine learning, we can really be helpful because it's like 4 lines of code. And all you have to do is send in the information and we just spit back an output, and then you can take it and do whatever you want with it. So we still do this, but hackathons are great because students have gone and built these crazy amazing projects in the span of like 48 hours just using some of our APIs.
Anything interesting that you'd like to plug specifically?
Let me think. There's been a lot of really great ones. A lot of content recommendation, like picking out keywords and topics and then suggesting you related articles. We saw a lot of projects like that. I think there was one that was like a fake news detector. And we've had a lot of interesting, during the elections, there was a project that used our political alignment detection API, and it was tracking, I can't even remember, but it was, I think, Hillary, Bernie, and someone else's, it wasn't Trump, it was someone else's Twitter feed, and it would analyze the tweets and show you on a graph where their political alignment was.
Fascinating. Out of curiosity, did you predict the presidential election?
Oh yeah, so this project that these students made, actually, all it did was like track and like see if it was.
But Indico didn't have some sort of predictive model working on the problem.
Yeah, we did not have any. We did not spend time building anything like that. Although, we probably should update our political API sometime soon, considering I feel like, the way people talk about politics now has changed, and like divides of like what parties and whatnot. So like the way the API works right now is like you put in the text and it'll tell you the political alignment of the author, not the statement. So yeah, I don't even know. Someone's probably analyzed Trump tweets with that. I'm curious to see what would come out.
Fascinating. Yeah, maybe I will do it. I actually just thought of a use case for your text analysis tool, so I might have to try it out. Last question. Where can my audience find you, and what is your ask to the audience? Do you have anything that you want them to take with them or go and do?
Yeah. So you can totally find me on our website. So I'm actually the person that like runs like the chat system on the website. So if you go to indico.io, there's like a bubble that pops up, and I think my face is on it, and it's like, hello, how can I help you? So I'm pretty accessible that way. And then, man, I don't know if I have an ask. I think my biggest ask is to stay. It doesn't really have to do with Indico at all, actually, but just stay informed and vigilant. And I think the biggest thing is staying informed and also questioning the sources of things and where you're finding your news. Definitely stay open-minded. And I think that's it. I don't have anything else in the way of an ask. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, my ask right now, it's funny you mentioned it. You have a fake news detector built at one of your hackathons. You know how Google, the app on your phone, will recommend stories for you? Well, so they've identified me as someone who's interested in like extraterrestrials and aliens, which I am from like a scientific standpoint, but they keep recommending all of these blatantly false stories about
Oh
like
my God.
NASA communicating with aliens and stuff. And I'm like, Google, come on, this is so low quality. So yeah, my ask would be for Google to start filtering fake news out of my feed, please.
Oh my gosh, that's so goofy.
Yeah, it's really weak. Yeah, but so indico.io, you can find Diana at indico.io. That I will have links in the show notes to a lot of the things that we talked about, TechStars, Indico, obviously, maybe some of the people that we mentioned, etc. Resources that were mentioned. Diana wants us to stay informed and vigilant. Diana, thank you so much for this conversation. It was really a pleasure, and I can't wait to make it back up to Boston to visit you and the team. I love your office up there. I love sitting and chatting with you guys. It's a really positive group of people.
Yeah, definitely. We'd love to have you back sometime soon. And thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you, Diana. Hello, everybody. Thank you for listening to this episode of Hacker Practice with my good friend Diana Yuan from Indico. They are an amazing machine learning startup that you've already learned a bit about, but you should definitely go check them out. Now, before you go, I just want to ask you to do a couple of things for me. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit that subscribe button and leave us a review on iTunes. These actions will help us climb the charts and get in front of a wider audience, which means more people will get to hear wonderful interviews like you heard today. Lastly, if you didn't like the episode or you did, either way, we want to hear from you. We want feedback about how we can do better. So go to hackerpractice.com and fill out the form on the homepage with your feedback and comments. I will read them and respond to them personally. So give us your feedback, hit that subscribe button, leave a review on iTunes. We hope you enjoyed today's episode with Diana Yuan from Indico. Looking forward to hearing from you. Bye-bye.